On BBC One.
Well, from everyone on the BBC One team tonight, we wish you a very happy and prosperous new year. Now time to join the News 24.
6 Serb civilians have Albanian between Serb-controlled territory and Kosovo. Point manned by the rebels as they were entering the buffer zone from United Nations-administered Kosovo.
Just a day ago, there were tensions between Serbia and Kosovo. Some ethnic Albanians agreed to remove 2 checkpoints in the troubled border. Came in talks sponsored by international KFOR peacekeepers to try to stop weeks of attacks on Serb security. The negotiations were set to follow, but now that has all been thrown into doubt. They are holding 6 Serbs captive in the buffer zone. 20 ethnic from Serbian prisons in return for each police report. Currently set a deadline of 3 days, part of a larger battle plan with the goal of claiming a chunk of Serbia. The Yugoslav leader says this it's not the only problem he's facing in the new year. In an address to the nation, he singled out relations with Montenegro, both part of the Yugoslav Federation. In the coming months, he said Montenegro deserved a fairer deal. He wanted it to remain part of Yugoslavia. Course with the Montenegrin leader Milo Đukanović. In his New Year message, he said the people of Montenegro would decide on their future themselves. That's right. It looks set to be another troubled and tense year. And Jones, BBC News.
The Gulf Cooperation Council has signed a pact that it's in great. The pact commits all 6 countries. Member falls victim to an Gulf leaders also agreed on steps to clear the way for a unified currency. The council has also called for oil output cuts at OPEC's next meeting in 17 days' time to shore up oil prices.
Leaders of the Gulf Cooperation Council with a full agenda. On the table, everything from military cooperation to moves towards a single oil. One decision prices with
agreed of in January.
Gulf summits tough line on Iraq, but the leaders this time struck an unusually conciliatory.
The declaration issued by this summit is different from the previous. Help the Iraqi people, and that the Iraqi leadership will comply with all the UN resolutions. Then we can achieve the common goal that everyone hopes for.
Organisers say the main achievement of this summit was a mutual defence pact. The 6 Gulf leaders have now agreed that a threat to one is a threat to all. Back in 1990, it was an American-led force that dislodged it. The Gulf action won't end now, but decades leaders say they'll set up their own early warning system, existing to around 20,000 troops. Caroline Hawley, BBC News.
This is BBC News. Reminder of the latest headlines. Millions of people across the world of the year 2000 and the start of the new. America and Israel have signed the treaty establishing a permanent international war crimes tribunal. Buckingham Palace has confirmed that Britain's Princess Margaret is unwell and that she's undergone medical tests. Admitted to hospital. The Queen's sister, who's 70, has been confined to bed over Christmas and...
The princess, who was 70 in August, has never truly recovered from 2 years ago. She gets tired very easily and sometimes becomes confused. Now doctors are trying to feeling unwell over the Christmas period by carrying out a series of tests. The princess is in bed at hospital. When she failed to appear with other members of the royal family at church on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, the palace said she was feeling tired, that there's more to it. After her stroke in 1998 on the Caribbean island of Mustique, she was 2 weeks. Most of her mobility was depressed, and that was exacerbated with her feet in an accident in the bath a year later. It was months before the bandages could be removed. Carry out the few engagements she slowly took on. At her mother's 100th birthday celebrations in the summer, Princess Margaret looked better than she had for some time. But the issued a statement about her health is a cause, say, not for immediate alarm. Jenny Bond, BBC News.
London's Millennium Dome, meanwhile, has closed to the public for the last time, a year to the day after it opened. More than 27,000 visitors flocked to the attraction yesterday, making it the UK's top tourist attraction, and the ever-present financial crisis. Greenwich to see the dome.
I would like to thank finally you, the members of the public, the 6.5 million people. Thank you for your trust. We love you.
The Dome's boss bringing down the curtain tonight at the end of a turbulent year. Celebrations.
Happy New Year! Thank you.
Dome the past year proved anything but happy. It opened, forced to queue for hours to get through security at Stratford Station. Behind the scenes, the past 12 months saw bankruptcy and appalling media coverage. The original proved hopelessly unrealistic, but the French boss still thinks it's a success.
I hope the Dome will be remembered for a fantastic fighting team that turned around a product and made it a world-class attraction. Remember, almost 70% of the people that come here say,
The Gerbeau Zone attractions today. The relentless has become a celebrity since he took over in February. But outside, the political attacks continued. A conservative up the Dome, but today the Tories think the £628 million it cost in lottery subsidy was simply too much. The Dome closed with the final 999th performance of the spectacular show in the central arena. Cast will be out of a job.
Ask people to 1,000 were here today. Almost all seem to be leaving happy. Almost all are sad that it's closing.
I thought it was great. It's the second time I've been and I really enjoyed it. Whatever people have said, you don't know unless you've been.
It was lovely. Very nice. It was good. Yeah.
It goes on and on and on and on because I think it's just magnificent. Bye now.
Gone, they shut the doors for the last time. This is to be less exciting if all goes to a high-tech business park. Nick Hyam, BBC News at the Millennium Dome.
As Orthodox Christians around the world celebrate Christmas this week, the most important Greek Orthodox theological closed on Beliada and a legal dispute with the Turkish.
On an island off the coast of Istanbul, the gardens of the ecumenical spiritual leader of more than 200 million Orthodox Christians spent 11 years. But the school has been closed since 1971 on the orders of the Turkish government. The Patriarch prefers not to give interviews, some subjects, but the Orthodox Church would dearly love this place to reopen.
And is a place where spirituality is expressed and experienced. It is important for us because it is where the future generation of patriarchs and bishops and professors will come from.
But not at the moment. 120 students from across the Orthodox world used to throng these halls. Now the building is maintained as part of a monastery, which has been a seat of learning for more than 1,000 years. It still boasts one of the finest collections of ancient books in the world. But few from the histories kept on these library shelves. For now, the in time. The marble is beautifully polished, but the corridors are silent, and so are the classrooms. Still, everything is allow students to return to these empty rooms. Beautiful island does have some powerful, at least President Clinton, who lobbied to have the theological school reopened when he visited Turkey just over a year ago. For a while it seemed as though that might be the moment past, and for now the stalemate continues. Regularly from his home on the Turkish mainland. Istanbul's dwindling Greek population fights hard to keep its traditions alive. But the Turkish authorities say the school can only reopen as part of a faculty in a Turkish. Laws which limit the influence of Islamic education have affected the Orthodox Church as well. Over the years, the school has between Turkey and Greece, but times are changing slowly.
We have overcome the period in which the Patriarchate was regarded with so much suspicion. Some people might still say, well, why do we need a relic of Byzantium in Istanbul? But I can understand them. But things have moved, and the present Patriarch is very much a man who is appreciated.
There are plenty of other theological schools around the world, but this is still an emotional issue, especially for the powerful Greek lobby in the United States. The Patriarch remains hopeful that the dispute can eventually be resolved, and the faith on this island still burns bright. But as the years pass, memories of a thriving centre of learning fade slowly into the shadows. Chris Morris, BBC News, Istanbul.
An American spacecraft has made its closest approach to the planet Jupiter, capturing dramatic pictures of the massive storms. Cameras on the Cassini spacecraft peered deep into the planet's cloud cover to reveal smaller ones.
Jupiter, the biggest planet in the solar system, 300 million miles from Earth. These spectacular images were captured by NASA's unmanned Cassini spacecraft as it hurtled through space. Jupiter is 1,400 times the size of Earth, and it was possible to take these pictures from a distance of 6 million miles.
The imaging experiment on Cassini has been very successful so far, and in fact it's performed beyond our wildest imaginings, and that's saying something because we've been imagining this for a decade now.
Liftoff of the Cassini spacecraft on $1 billion.
First launched in 1997 at a cost of $3.5 billion, the Cassini spacecraft's final destination is Saturn. But on the way, it's joined up with the Galileo spacecraft, which has been orbiting Jupiter for 5 years. Together, they've recorded the sound of solar wind hitting the planet's magnetosphere, and they've taken unprecedented still pictures of a thunderstorm in progress. Most impressive of all are the shots of Jupiter's famous red spot, in fact, a 300-year-old hurricane that itself is bigger than planet Earth. Andy Ty, BBC News.
This is BBC News.
Hello, good morning. We begin the new year with a look back at the year 2000. And across England and Wales, it's set to be the wettest year since 1872. It's been another very warm year as well. And it's starting to turn milder at the moment. Mild air pushing its way across the whole of the UK, and temperatures are tending to rise a little. So that come the end of the night, 3 or 4 degrees, the lowest temperatures across northeastern parts of the UK. Much milder though further west and further south, with 11 degrees quite likely in Devon and Cornwall. Now, over the coming few nights, we may well see some patchy frost now and again, but we're not going to return to this very... We saw general warming trend to some milder weather, especially across the southern half of the UK. It's come a little too late for some of these sporting events during tomorrow. A number of football matches have been cancelled, and 3 of the race meetings at Cheltenham, Catterick and Leicester have been abandoned. There are early morning inspections at Exeter and Plumpton, but the racing at Southwell goes ahead on the all-weather track. Now, the milder air is coming in behind this particular weather front. that snow earlier on. But the winds are turning into the south or southwest, a much milder direction, but rotating all the way around this area of low pressure. And over the week ahead, it's low pressure that's going to dominate our weather. This particular low tending to split into two, the more active low pressure systems being across the southern half of the UK. And it's here we're likely to see some of the wettest weather over the coming. Quite a lot of rain already, and as we clear the snow away, we've got the risk of some flooding of the UK with some heavy rain around as well. More details on that, CFAX page 400, or that floodline number for England and Wales, 0845 988 1188. We saw during yesterday was down across the southwest at Camborne, 36 millimetres, an inch and a half of rain in 15 hours. It's been drying up here, and that wetter weather has been pushing its way towards the east and clearing the way by the morning time. Still staying rather damp and drizzly and rather misty and murky as well. And that sets the scene, I think, for the morning time. A rather grey start, misty, especially over the hills. Pockets of rain and drizzle here and there. Now, it's going to be western and southern areas that tend to brighten up best of all through. But watch out for some of those showers, some of which could be on the heavy side. And over these snowfields that will gradually start to melt in the northeast, it could well be rather misty into the afternoon. Quite a breezy day again, especially I think across the southwest and through the Irish Sea. But look at these temperatures, much milder, 5 or 6 in the east, 9 or 10 as you move down towards the southwest. And we keep that mild air into Tuesday, but we're going to find some more rain, this time pushing in across many central and southern parts of the UK. Somewhat drier further north with some sunshine, but well, slow to clear away from the southern parts of England and Wales during Wednesday. So rather miserable conditions here, but it stays mild. Further north, well, we've got those brighter skies, some sunshine, and again 1 or 2 showers blown in across some northern and western parts of Scotland. And then as we move towards the end of the week, well, we've still got that wet weather around in from the west this time, but still temperatures of 9 or 10 in the south, whereas further north 6 or 7. That's it. Have a great new year. Bye-bye.
An awful lot of comedy writers are a depressive bunch, you know.
Anytime I said something funny, my father would say, "That's a great line, write it down."
And I don't see anything wrong with a book of entertainment also having a certain educational point to it as well.
Writing is a subversive act in a way. Everyone's highly suspicious of it.
Tim Sebastian reveals the people behind the words in Hard Talk, all this week on BBC News 24.
Are you worried about the way the world's weather seems to be changing? Well, I'm Richard Wilson, and right now I'm in Greenland. In the last few months, I've also visited Antarctica and the Himalayan glaciers, and I'll be reporting on just exactly what seems to be happening to our weather.
A reporter's special, Saturday at 4:30 on BBC News 24.
Hello, good morning. This is BBC News 24 with me, Clarence Mitchell. It's exactly 2:30, the latest national and international news stories. All-night celebrations are continuing as revellers celebrate the end of the year 2000 and the start of the new year. After Big Ben chimed midnight, thousands of party-goers who'd gathered in central London were treated to a firework display. And in Scotland, the Hogmanay celebrations took place in their usual festive style. In Edinburgh, people were treated to 7 separate firework displays across the city, as well as a stage show in the shadow of Edinburgh Castle. Well, back here in London, one of the most controversial projects of the new millennium, the Dome, has finally closed its doors for the last time as a visitor attraction. The Dome put on a final show for its visitors before shutting down. Performers took their last bows at the attraction, which will reopen as a high-tech business park. The Dome has drawn in just over half of the 12 million visitors who'd been predicted. Buckingham Palace has confirmed that Princess Margaret is unwell and that she's undergone medical tests. The Queen's sister has been confined to bed over the Christmas and New Year period and was seen by a doctor on Saturday and early on New Year's Eve at who's 70 years old, was last seen in public in November at a London ballet gala evening. She was absent, though, from the royal family's Christmas Eve and Christmas Day church services and the palace said at the time that she was feeling tired. The United States has signed a treaty establishing the world's first permanent international criminal court. The court aims to bring to justice future perpetrators of genocide and crimes against humanity. The US did initially have doubts about the court at a conference in Rome in 1998, but 2 years on it's now decided to support it. The court will only come into existence, though, once 60 countries have ratified the treaty. Shortly before the deadline expired, Israel also signed the treaty. There's been another escalation of the violence between Israelis and Palestinians on the West Bank. Tabet, a senior official of Yasser Arafat's Fatah faction, has been shot dead in the West Bank. Mr. Tabet was killed as he left his home in the town of Tulkarm. Shortly before that, one of the most extreme leaders of the Jewish settler movement was also killed by Palestinian gunmen in a separate attack north of Ramallah. Binyamin Kahana and his wife were both shot dead in their car. 5 of their children were wounded in the attack. A Palestinian group has admitted responsibility. Parts of Britain are again in the grip of bad weather conditions. More than 50 water mains burst in Northern Ireland due to the cold temperatures. And there are warnings of more travel problems to come. In North Wales and West Yorkshire, blizzard conditions made the roads treacherous. A group of Chinese, Korean and Japanese students have begun the new year by celebrating the breaking of a world record. They knocked down 3.4 million dominoes, beating the previous record held by the Netherlands by 500,000 pieces. The display took a month to set up and over an hour and a half to topple. Featured in it were the words Happy New Year in the languages of the 3 countries. Well, those are the main national and international stories at just after 2:30. I'll be back at 3 with a full bulletin of world news. But now, here on BBC News 24, it's time for the next in our series of world reviews, Beyond 2000 with George Alagaya.
Hello and welcome to World Review Beyond 2000. This program is devoted to an eventful political year in the Americas and not just in the United States. But we do begin with the extraordinary events of election 2000, which have tarnished the US's favorite boast, that it is the world's greatest democracy. The electoral deadlock in Florida prompted mischievous offers from countries such as Cuba and Russia. They said they could provide impartial election observers. The arguments over recounts and challenges in court have put a strain on America's Constitution. Our Miami correspondent, Malcolm Brabant, looks at how election 2000 and its aftermath took America into uncharted political waters.
On the 36th day after America went to the polls, Al Gore finally relinquished the prize he believed he had rightfully won.
Don't do it! Don't do it!
Good evening. Just moments ago, I spoke with George W. Bush and congratulated him on becoming the 43rd President of the United States. And I promised him that I wouldn't call him back this time.
After a difficult election, we must put politics behind us and work together to make the promise of America available for every one of our citizens.
But is the presidency a poisoned chalice? Polls show little more than half the people consider Mr. Bush to be the true victor. More than a third believe he won on a technicality, while the rest are convinced that he is not America's legitimate president.
It's made people wonder if our system really works. We'll come together, and we always will. We are a very confident country, and that's why we're so confident and civilized and doing so well, but I think that it has taken a toll on America.
I think we'll be able to get behind this president, and I think we'll be able to support him, and I hope he does things that allows us to get behind him. I hope he doesn't pursue a bitter or partisan agenda.
As this election was settled by the judiciary instead of a universally accepted vote count, President Bush's ability to govern could be sorely undermined. With the Democratic camp feeling cheated, the bitterly divided U.S. Congress could cut him down to size.
He is a humbled figure, but a good dose of humility could actually be a positive thing. I think a president who understands that he must meet with the opposing side and create an agenda of consensus ultimately can be a stronger president.
Rather than Congress dominated by one party strongly that can sort of dictate to the president the terms, in this case, you know, the president has a chance to look at a divided Congress and attract a few votes from the other party and really lead in a magnanimous way.
2, 4, 6, 8. How many recaps does it take?
Hardline Republicans are pushing Mr. Bush to force through some of his more controversial campaign promises, such as the $1.3 trillion tax cut and Social Security reforms that would allow people to invest a portion of their pension contributions on the stock market. If Mr. Bush is determined to implement his manifesto, he will have to divide and rule. He will have to split the opposition by either persuading or coercing conservative white Democrats to back him. And if he does that, he risks further alienating the very people who feel most aggrieved by the result of this election, Black Americans. Although they turned out in record numbers for Al Gore, black leaders claim that tens of thousands were disenfranchised by inefficient and obstructive election officials, unreliable voting machines, and police intimidation.
What I saw in Florida was reminiscent of the old South. It was reminiscent of people stealing elections. It was reminiscent of Jim Crow. It was reminiscent of all those things we tried so long to do away with.
He wants us to be good victims. He wants us to shut up and suffer quietly for the good of the country. I say to you, we're not going to do it. We're going to keep marching. We're going to keep demonstrating. We're going to raise hell all over this country. Thank you.
A noisy and angry African-American campaign to shine a light on the irregularities in Florida failed to change the final outcome of this election. But Mr. Bush is under pressure to investigate and act upon their complaints to ensure there is no repeat.
Look, this guy got elected at the expense of people who didn't get their votes counted. The least that he can do is prove to them that they count. So he has to go beyond the ordinary situation that a president would find himself in and do a great deal more than even those that the African-American community thought would do something, such as a Bill Clinton. He has to do twice as much as Bill Clinton did. If he's unwilling to do that, then we will vote against his behind again 4 years from now.
The Democrats believe they're the moral victors of election 2000. Their candidate won more votes, but he lost in the Electoral College. Over the next 4 years, there will be an impassioned debate to determine whether future presidents should be chosen by the Electoral College system or by a simple majority. Traditionalists believe the Constitution worked this time, even though it was the most difficult election in more than a century, perhaps the most difficult in American history. But there is great enthusiasm for change, especially amongst the Greens, whose 2% condemned Al Gore to second place.
If we had had instant runoff voting now, there would have not been any sort of problem. There would have been no such thing as a spoiler issue, and there would have been no question as to who was elected President of the United States. Because with the instant runoff voting, you must have 50% plus 1 to win.
No vote.
And the last ballot.
After the chaos caused by antiquated voting machines with their dimpled and hanging chads, the #1 electoral priority is to reform the way Americans cast their ballots.
I don't see why we can't vote electronically. I don't see why everybody can't vote electronically and give the voice back to the people.
You'll check in as a voter at the polling place as we do now. You will be given a key that will give you access to a computer. You'll randomly be signed a number which will not be correlated to your vote, to your name. You will punch in on a touch screen, for example, your choices. It will be impossible for you to vote for 2 offices, and the computer will be programmed to ask you, is this really how you intended your ballot to look?
Perhaps forgotten in the excitement of this close race is that nearly half of all eligible voters abstained on election day. As is so often the case, many Americans felt that they had to choose the lesser of 2 evils, rather than make a positive vote for the better candidate. Not enough were impressed with the worthy but newly passionate Al Gore. More importantly, however, not enough were concerned that the comparatively lightweight Mr. Bush was unable to name the new military leader of Pakistan.
Stability of the country, and I think that's good news for the subcontinent.
And you can name him.
General, I can't name the general.
And it's
General.
They say you learn more about yourself through trial and through troubles than you do when times are good and when times are easy. And we've had some wonderful times over the last 8 years, over the last 10 years, and I think this will teach us more about who we are as a people than the last 8 years of prosperity and growth. So I think hopefully we'll come through this and we'll be better for it.
In the heat of the U.S. election battle, it was easy to overlook one central figure who for once stayed out of the spotlight. William Jefferson Clinton was relegated to the political shadows, pondering his place in history. He came to power 8 years ago, vowing to focus on domestic concerns, but his policy plans became bogged down in the bitter partisanship of Congress, and of course his own impeachment. As Richard Lister reports from Washington, it is President Clinton's foreign policy that may provide his most enduring legacy.
He's traveled further than any other American president. Bill Clinton has landed in almost 50 countries, some of which had never received a U.S. leader before. He was the first to tour Africa. He made a historic trip to South Asia, too, reviving a long-dormant relationship. In Beijing, he proclaimed China to be a strategic partner. He went to Russia twice to support its transition from communism and push for arms control. His message was always proliferation is a threat to peace. Democracy and trade are the keys to prosperity.